Welcome in to the RotoWire NFL podcast. For this week, I'm your host, John McKechnie, joined, as always, by Mario Puig. Mario just got back from Las Vegas the other day, the annual RotoWire Vegas trip. Always a good time. Seeing the entire company, seeing a lot of cool people. I ran into Steve Kerr.
Really?
Huh? Yeah, yes. Yeah, outside of the dinner the last night. Even won a little bit of money on blackjack, something that is unprecedented for your boy. So feeling
Excellent.
yeah, I'm walking tall
It's
right
gonna
now,
be a
feeling
winning.
good.
It's gonna be a winning year for John McKechnie. After the blackjack, everything else is easy.
All signs point to it. Threw down a couple of bets. Might shock you. I put down on the Georgia Bulldogs to win the national title. Had such a close one with Trey Mancini in the All-Star break, or the home run derby, but that would have like taken it over the top. But still an amazing trip, just as it was every year. So a lot of fun was had, and of course one of the staples of the RotoWire Vegas trip is the RotoWire Vegas draft, which is a old school style standard. Two running backs, three receivers, a flex, one quarterback, one tight end, defense, and a kicker. So that just the good old school style. I think three leagues were running for that one. So I want to get into my Vegas league, which was ran by Tim Schuler. There's a write-up on the site as well from Liz writing up his particular league, but we'll go and dive into mine a little bit, and I'll get the board tweeted out. I will not share my screen this time because I don't want to send the broadcast into a wormhole the way I did last week. But so Mario, I started out at the 9 spot. I ended up with Saquon Barkley. How does that happen?
That doesn't happen often. Yeah. Freaking Chris Benzine is the big reason, I would say. Just kidding, Chris. It's also Eric Halterman took Nick Chubb. That doesn't happen very often. You don't see Jonathan Taylor ahead of Saquon that often either, but Nick Rawling made that pick. I've made it too a few times, so that one I think it's a little unconventional, but pretty easily rationalized. And I guess there's a case for Cam Akers, maybe even Chubb over Barkley. I guess it being standard scoring might have also kind of lessened Barkley's relative appeal.
Right, and that with this draft, there's a human element component where Jonathan Taylor wasn't going to fall through that like stronghold of Badger fans. Like that just wasn't going to happen, whether it was Rawlings, Zine, or Eric Halterman. So wasn't completely shocked, but that JT went early. I was surprised by the Akers pick, but like you said, if you can dream on the upside scenario for him, then it's totally feasible that he ends up with the top 10 season. But even still, all that considered, it feels almost criminal to have Zeke fall into my lap at 9. I mean, I've been a little bit skeptical. I've cooled off on the skepticism over the course of the off season, but coming into draft season, my first couple of best ball drafts, that sort of thing. If I drew a pick inside the top 5, I was probably going in another direction. With the tiebreaker being he's coming off the significant knee injury, but seems like he's made all the progress that you would expect a guy as athletic and as young as he is. So looks like he's kind of all systems go. They've invested a fair amount into that offensive line via the draft and everything. So I think things are really, really looking up for Saquon in a way where, if he's there for you, pick 6 and beyond, I think it's a slam dunk.
Yeah, I am not particularly high on Barkley at his normal price, but after the 6th pick especially, it's pretty easy to sell. And I talked a little bit on the radio with, I can't remember, I guess it would have been with Jim, but I mentioned that I'm not really taking Chubb at like 10 or 11 if he costs that much this year, just because I do think it's going to take Kareem Hunt getting hurt for Chubb to be the ceiling theory that he otherwise might have. It's not going to be like, well, if I was running the team, he would probably get 20 carries and 5 catches a game, but I think the Browns are going to say, we got to get Kareem Hunt on the field. And as long as that's the case, I don't see how Chubb can catch Saquon Barkley from scrimmage.
Yeah, I think that's totally reasonable. I mean, that they have the Browns. As much as we like Nick Chubb, the Browns would be foolish to use Kareem Hunt the way that the Giants would use a Devontae Booker or something. Like, if you have a guy as talented as Kareem Hunt, you do need to get him on the
John.
field.
if I was running the Browns offense, I'd be taking Chubb first overall. But unfortunately, and no, I get it. I'm joking a little bit. Kareem Hunt is good. I don't think he's bad or anything, but I do think Chubb is basically the best running back along with Dalvin Cook. Total monsters in their unique category.
Yeah, totally. So either way, things are setting up well for both of those.
Good value for your team. Yeah.
Yes. So I was very, very happy with that, and in fact, it was 9 running backs to start things off. So that after I picked, the streak ended. We had a guy take Travis Kelce to start things off, and then he piggybacked and got Tyreek Hill, so a little bit of a Chiefs stack going. Kind of an interesting play, but one that could obviously pan out anytime that you have both of Patrick Mahomes' top pass catchers. That's not a bad thing. Looking elsewhere, I like the double tap at 12 and 13, so the end of the first and first pick of the second. Ryan Poole went Antonio Gibson, which is, I think that might be the highest I've seen him go. And then he went with Austin Eckler. But I think that's still like a nice 1-2 pairing for starting things off. Even if it is standard, that takes away a little bit of that upside, but it's still, I think, a really nice start, especially when the rest of the first round was as running back heavy as it was.
Yeah, you guys really hammered running back. So when I'm picking from 11 or 12, like Ryan was, I pretty much always go running back, and we'll see how that ages. But basically, I just want to get really good running backs early so that I can put volume at receiver, especially in best ball, of course, which I mainly do. That's less pertinent in this environment, but every year, I feel like I can find receivers in the mid-round sooner than I can find a running back in the mid-round. And especially when you guys are drafting as running back aggressive as you were, there's pretty high risk when you're at the turn of the round that by the time your third pick comes up, you're choosing between like Kareem Hunt and James Conner or something like that. So I like the choice to get Gibson there. I'm higher on Gibson than most people. Eckler, maybe it's going to be tough for him to get there in PPR, but definitely love the player, and normally I like that pick, especially in half-point PPR or full PPR. I probably would have taken Joe Mixon instead in this format, just because, or Aaron Jones, somebody like that, just because Eckler's appeal does rest so heavily in the pass catching. But he's a good player. I will never truly bash an Eckler pick.
No, you can't do it. I don't know if you saw the clip earlier, but he's back to doing one-arm pull-ups at the gym. Said he hadn't done that in a while. So, I mean, it's all systems go. Recalibrate as you see fit, of course. And just a quick reminder, of course, that the RotoWire NFL podcast is brought to you by our friends over at WinBet. Forgot to drop that at the beginning, but yes, our friends over at WinBet sponsoring us here on the RotoWire NFL pod. Let's move on a little bit. So, like we've established, there is a ton of running back action early. So, with my next pick with the fourth pick of the second round, I went with my best receiver on the board, and obviously pound the table for this guy every single year. But AJ Brown, I felt pretty good about that, and the standard scoring, I think he's might even be better in that format than PPR. Yeah. So
I think so.
I was pretty ecstatic to end up with him. I don't know how much Aaron Jones I'm going to end up with this season. I don't know why exactly, but I'll probably feel a little bit more comfortable going with A.J. Dillon in the mid to late rounds, round 9 or whatever his ADP is right now. It tends to make a fair bit of sense to me because Jones isn't going to be hogging all those snaps, that type of thing. So going running back, I did kind of have to just cross my fingers after that and hope that I could get a decent RB2 because, this was a draft where Clyde Edwards-Helaire went late second. Josh Jacobs went way higher than he usually does. He went at the end of the second round. Right. So I definitely wanted to leave the first couple of, or the first like 3 or 4 rounds with a couple of running backs I felt really strongly about, and I was able to do that because in the third round, DeAndre Swift fell to me, and I was lucky in that sense too because again the guys that we were drafting with, we all know each other, and Benzine specifically, I could see him trolling me and taking my Georgia Bulldog right before I'm about to pick, but luckily that was not the case.
Yeah, I love Swift in the third round, and especially like point per reception. I guess he doesn't usually fall there in point per reception, but I'm drafting a lot of DeAndre Swift in the late third, which is half point PPR on underdog. In standard scoring, it might be kind of like the Eckler thing. He might lose a little bit just because he's so much a pass catcher as a running back. But I've been saying, for at least a couple weeks, I view Kamara, Austin Eckler, and DeAndre Swift pretty similarly in terms of the kind of usage I expect from them and the types of usage, not just the volume. So with that and the fact that I think they're kind of similarly talented, Kamara is definitely the best one, or probably the best one of the two. And Eckler's a guy you really don't want to, underrate because his pass catching season 2 years ago is basically the best a running back has ever done aside from Marshall Faulk's 2 or 3 best pass catching seasons, which is pretty crazy to reach that sort of height. I love Eckler, but if I pick between those 3 for the price, I like Swift the most because I don't think the gap in the ADP from Kamara to Eckler to Swift is soundly reasoned on the basis of talent or usage. And part of that, too, is I'm a little concerned about Taysom Hill and the effect that he might have on Kamara, to be fair. If this was Drew Brees' offense, Kamara safely wins. There's just some uncertainty in his case that he hasn't dealt with previously.
No, absolutely. So that makes him, he fell. We did an underdog draft that we live streamed a few weeks back, and Kamara fell to me at like 5 or 6, and I hadn't seen him go really outside of the top 3 or 4. And like you mentioned, it's a half-point PPR format, so that was a bit of a surprising development there. Let's move forward here. Kyle Pitts was my next pick. So he was the first tight end to go outside of that pretty well-established top tier of Kelsey, Waller, Kittle. I was considering trying to go for like a Mark Andrews, Lamar Jackson combo in the 4th and 5th rounds, but with Pitts still available and just my general thinking on him for this year, and I think I'm a little bit light on shares at present time. I wanted to bank one, so I went ahead and got the rookie tight end. So I know that, or I think I have an idea of how you would evaluate this pick, but please let us know.
Yeah, I get that there's risk with it, but I am totally okay with that risk personally. Maybe it would be different if I had something like 10 Kyle Pitts teams by now, but I only have like 3 or 4 or 5 or something like that, and I want some exposure because in general I think the tight end ADP is pretty sharp. I think that the one that I target is largely just dependent on what draft slot I get, because there's nothing wrong with Kelsey's price, there's nothing wrong with Waller or Kittle's price. Pitts is the first one of any serious contention among people regarding the ADP. I'm okay with that one too. I'm okay with Hawkinson. I'm okay with Andrews. I like Fant. I like Jonnu. And there's a couple others. The ones that I'm not naming, it's not like I hate them. Logan Thomas is the only one that I really don't want to pay the price on. So getting Pitts there and taking him with just the awareness that you need to kind of land a little bit better at receiver than most teams, having spent that tight end pick that early. That's a task that I personally am not intimidated by at all. I think it's pretty easy to find wide receiver sleepers, at least as long as people keep letting me get DJ Chark in the 7th round. I'm going to keep drafting that way. So I like the Pitts pick, and I, at the very least, as much as I'm conceding that there's risk with him, and it's somewhat aggressive to take him at his current price, I don't think that the case against him is very well stated by the people who tend to make it. They don't really say it very well. It's not an interesting case to me to say, well, look how past tight ends did. He's not going to be like any of those players. You're going to have to point to a player who was utilized like him and still failed. And the closest someone seems to get is like the Megatron rookie season, which, he did pretty well. He had like 750 yards and 4 touchdowns in 14 or 15 games, even though they for some wretched reason where playing him behind Mike Furry and Sean McDonald, and John Kitna was the quarterback. So I think at the very least, Pitts' critics should acknowledge or should concede that his presumed success is unprecedented, but it's also there's no precedent to say that he's likely to fail. There's no Kyle Pitts prior case to point toward. The closest you can really get is stuff like, in my opinion, a little bit of a mix of like Marquez Colston and Jeremy Shockey, and namely, Shockey got the force-fed usage that we expect to happen with Pitts, but at least in hindsight, Shockey was not that good of a player. He was like a pretty good starting tight end. He just had some stupid hype because he was, novel.
He had the half sleeve forearm bands that were those were all the rage there too.
He was a good player, but they really wanted him to be something that he wasn't. Whereas I think with the Falcons, you have the same want, and the skills are at this time. And in any case, people should look at it more like he's the wide receiver 2 of the Falcons. So whatever you believe about Matt Ryan, I think, regardless of what anyone wants to isolate Pitts from the reasoning, like if you think Matt Ryan's throwing for 4,000 yards this year, you're high on Pitts. And if you think Matt Ryan's throwing for 4,000 yards, then fine, you are actually low on Pitts. But if you think Ryan's going above a certain point in the yardage, you either get to believe that Calvin Ridley's going for like 2,200 yards, or you think Kyle Pitts is pushing 1,000 and like 8 to 10 touchdowns.
Yep, that distills it really nicely. Yeah, you simply just can't compare him to other cases. I know that like the rookie tight end thing is it's long been discussed, long been established, but kind of like what Liss was saying a couple of years ago when there was some talk of regression for Patrick Mahomes coming off of his rookie season. It's like, well, you wouldn't put the average regression on a guy like Patrick Mahomes. Like that's a different case. You don't regress him to the average type of quarterback. And similar case here with Pitts. Like there hasn't been really a guy like him, and especially
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I think I got a leg making it worse. But no, it's like the people who make the case against Pitts need to be more measured in what they're saying. Because if they stopped the reasoning at like, there's no precedent for it, that's fine. But saying like these prior cases pertain to him at all, it's just you've just said that you misunderstand all the players involved, and maybe you'll be right or something. But at best, it was for reasons that you yourself did not state in your reasoning.
That'll be one fantasy victory lap that I hope doesn't happen this year. I really I'm all in on Pitts.
Yeah.
Kind of just crushing it as a rookie right away. I don't want to see the I told you so guys. So yeah, hopefully that won't come to pass, and I don't think that it will. So speaking of targeting some receivers and being able to go heavy on other positions early in the draft with kind of the hope that you're able to find those receiver values. That's kind of how I went into it, especially after my build through the first 5 picks where I only had one receiver. I had a really good feeling that the T. Higgins would make it back to me with my 6th pick, and then going with Jerry Jeudy and Marquise Brown to piggyback all of that in the 8th and the 9th round. What could have been kind of a high wire act as far as getting some good receivers went. I'm really happy with how like those first 3 specifically, but all 4 really panned out.
Yeah, I'd be a little worried about Jeudy and standard scoring just because I think some of his appeal, or a lot of his appeal, is that he might be like an 80, 85 catch guy, but it's hard to see the Broncos throwing more than, 25 touchdowns this year or something like that. And Sutton and Fant, even Tim Patrick he's pretty capable, and the other 2 are of course very capable. So I like Jeudy. Maybe he'll is a wide receiver 2 or 3, able to do enough. And sorry, who's the other one, the third one that you said? Oh, you started with Higgins, I know, and then who was the third one?
Marquise Brown.
Oh, Marquise Brown. Yeah, believe it or not, I think I like him almost as much as Jeudy in standard scoring, just because Lamar is the 43 touchdown quarterback, and Marquise Brown is good at scoring touchdowns, just because he's he's a big play threat. So excuse me, I think Marquise Brown might be a guy who does surprisingly well in standard scoring, if only because guys like Judy, pass, just target volume guys who catch a lot of passes, they don't necessarily advance as quickly in the point totals as in standard scoring as people might think.
Yeah, and that's a good point on the team context as far as Denver, and you project out how many passing touchdowns that they can realistically have this year. Maybe with the 17 games it pushes closer to 30, but I don't know. It seems like a pretty messy quarterback situation there, of course. So that keeps Judy's ADP and Fant's ADP, I think, at reasonable spots. And I think I did a underdog draft for the puppy the other day, and I believe Tim Patrick was like available still in the last round. So yeah, I'll take a flyer on that just in case.
I took him in the last round. I was doing a draft the other day, and I took Tim Patrick in the final round. I'm pretty sure he's going to have better numbers this year than Hamler. And I like Hamler, but Patrick's pretty good, and people just they wrote him off for no good reason.
Yeah, and he's coming off of an awesome season. I think he's kind of proven now that he's a legitimate NFL wide receiver. I don't think that he's most years going to be a number one or a number two guy for a healthy offense, but he can definitely contribute. He's got the size to be a guy in the red zone. So keep an eye on him in your later rounds. But don't want to belabor this draft too much longer. I rounded things out. Robert Tonyan in the 10th, Tony Pollard, Kirk Cousins, which is a bit of a misstep. This was a live draft, so I didn't really think to look at the sheet of paper that had Matt Ryan's sticker on it. Whoops. But still, I already had Russell Wilson.
I probably prefer Kirk Cousins. Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. I don't feel too bad about it then. I got Terrace Marshall, got the Ravens kicker, so obviously Justin Tucker. That's the Ravens defense. And then Alexander Madison and Michael Badgley, the money badger, to round things out. So I walk away from this team feeling pretty confident. I've taken down this league before, and I think that these guys might have the goods to do it again.
Yeah, it's too bad it's not PPR. I would put like heavy money on your team to win it if it was PPR, especially. But even in standard scoring, I think DeAndre Swift is going to be one of the yards from scrimmage leaders at running back. It's just, it would have been nice to get another 80 points or whatever it would have been.
Yeah, for sure. But you live and you learn, and the standard scoring. I think it's still going to turn out to be just fine. So that's going to round it out as far as the Vegas draft is concerned. We're going to get to the Scott Fish Bowl wrap-up discussion here right after a word from our sponsors. All right, so last time that we picked it up, I think you were in like the third or the fourth round of your particular Fish Bowl draft. I think I had just taken my fifth selection, which was Baker Mayfield. So we were not particularly far along, but now I believe all the Fish Bowl drafts have completed. And Mario, how did you approach your end game, or not necessarily end game, but how did things go for you since we last talked?
I pretty much just my only strategy, which I didn't really think through that much, was just taking kind of my draft board and giving preference to quarterbacks and tight ends. And then once I got quarterbacks and tight ends accounted for, I just kind of let it roll like I normally would without thinking too much about it. But I got Dak Prescott, Matthew Stafford, Kyle Pitts as my first three picks, and then I was like, all right, just time to just aim all over at running back and receiver and just pile up numbers there for a while. So I took two running backs first, DeAndre Swift and J.K. Dobbins, and I was hoping to get more like Swift as my second running back and somebody not better than Dobbins. I think Dobbins is a really good player, but someone who gets more work than Dobbins perhaps as my second running back. But there is a version of possible events, like if Gus Edwards gets nicked up, Dobbins goes from late third round pick to really really high, something 15, top 20. So there's a certain version of upside possible there, despite the lack of a floor week to week. Hopefully my quarterbacks and my tight end and DeAndre Swift can make that irrelevant. We'll see. Didn't get my first receivers until the 6th round when I took Cooper, Tyler Lockett. 9th round I took DJ Chark. So I actually took Noah Fant before I took DJ Chark, and it was pretty much just because I was like, he's getting way too close to his normal ADP, which is usually in like the 9th round. And in this tight end premium scoring, I was like, someone should have had to take him in the 7th. I can't let these guys get Noah Fant in the 9th round or something. So I took him. I'm probably going to start him. He's not like going to be a backup or anything for me. You can start something like 4 tight ends if you want. So I expect Fant to catch 70, 80 passes this year maybe, and in this scoring, that should make him pretty valuable. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with Cooper, Lockett, and Chark as my top 3 receivers. I have more faith in Chark than most people. I've probably talked about that a lot already. But particularly if I have high point totals at quarterback and tight end, I think Cooper, Lockett, Chark can do the trick. I was glad to get Dak and Cooper, of course. Antonio Brown is my 4th receiver. Damian Harris as my 3rd running back. Totally okay with both of those. I started to get really on brand when in the 12th round I took Cam Newton as my 3rd quarterback. And it was almost like the Fant thing. I was like, man, I don't really feel like I even need to take Cam here. But I think I acknowledge it's risky, but I really feel like there's so much upside with him that people aren't considering to this point in the offseason. And I want to be ahead of that if there's ever any kind of like waking up. Like if we get to, middle of August and people are saying it looks like it's going to be Cam, he's going to go from like the 17th round in normal leagues up to the, who knows, like 11th, 10th, something like that. So maybe even higher. He can put up a lot of fantasy points, including in the fishbowl format. And I didn't plan to do this, but when my 15th pick came up, I was cool enough with my, running backs, tight ends, receivers. I actually took Mac Jones. I didn't think he was going to be there. I assumed someone was going to take him right after I took Cam in the 12th, actually. But no one did. And, normally I don't pursue handcuffs or whatever, but in this format, it was like, why not? I mean, I think Mac Jones is a good prospect. It's not like I think he's a bum. I just happen to be high on Cam. So glad to get them both. I got the quarterback for the Patriots one way or another. So that gives me, I think it's good if quarterback lineup is anybody in my division or whatever. Otherwise, I got Devontae Parker, Paris Campbell, Christian Kirk in the 13th, 14th, and 16th. And then from that point, I basically just hammered backup running backs. So I ended up with Chuba Hubbard, Tevin Coleman. I guess he could start. I don't really care. Took Wayne Gallman and Elijah Mitchell, hopefully cornering some part of the San Francisco backfield in the process. And Alex Collins was my last pick because I thought if Rashad Penny's busted and Chris Carson gets hurt, I actually think Collins would start for the Seahawks in that case.
Yeah, I actually had Collins in my queue for, I think, my 21st pick, but, little egg on my face. I guess I ended up with Mark Ingram instead, so maybe someone jumped up and grabbed Collins. But before then, I got Nico Collins, unrelated, a little bit earlier than that as well. But yeah, I actually think Collins is Alex Collins, to be specific, is a definite solid like dart throw at the end, because like you said, Carson, he's had the durability concerns, and we just don't know what present day Rashad Penny looks like. So Collins, not too far removed from some very good fantasy seasons. It could, be a total boon, but also you don't have to pay a price to where it actually hurts you if it never really materializes.
Right. Yeah, he's only relevant in drafts that have like 20 or more rounds, but as far as that list of names deep in the haystack, it's like annoying, unexpected things happen every year. Like Wayne Gallman having the season he did last year probably was a lower probability outcome than Collins having a season like that this year. Very unlikely, but weird stuff happens.
Absolutely. So, I definitely like the strategy of hammering some backup running backs late. I really think that's a strong end game strategy. We had a couple overlaps in our picks. We both ended up with Damian Harris, so that's good. Although I took him 3 rounds earlier than you did, so maybe I was just a little bit too aggressive on that one, but either way.
I mean, I like Harris a lot, and it's not the kind of thing that I can advise people to draft on this assumption, because it's probably not going to happen, but I still think there's a chance he gets some pass catching work this year. Like, he was never bad at that at Alabama, and he might have just never gotten reps for it previously because they had Burkhead and White already.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, maybe he's not a complete zero as far as the pass catching is concerned. One comment. Where's your kicker, man?
Oh, right. So I didn't look into the actual scoring system for kickers until, I don't know, the 10th round or something. And once I saw that you lose points for missed field goals, it was just a big never mind for me, because I feel like kickers, if they didn't lose points for missed field goals or missed extra points, would be barely flex viable in this league, like bye-week flex viable, because it's really easy for a kicker to just kind of get like 3-4 points in a game, and their higher range outcomes rarely go higher than like 12 or 13 or something like that. So I'd rather have like almost any player that I know the name of over a kicker in that kind of format.
That's fair. I went the other route, and I believe I was the first person to take a kicker in my draft. Yep, place kicker 1, so that's Justin Tucker. Took him in the middle of the 12th round. If there is an exception to the kicker rule, or the kicker details that you're mentioning there, I feel like it's Justin Tucker. Maybe it's just my purple colored glasses. Who knows? But I felt okay
even a guy
about
like
that.
Zerline misses. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna. Even a guy like Zerline misses a bunch of kicks, even though he makes a bunch too. So it's like it's Butker and it's Tucker. That's about it.
Right. Yeah. Zerline. Yeah. Legatron. He's great because he can make the long field goals, and you get the full decimal scoring in this particular format. So if he hits a 57-yarder, that's 5.7 points. That type of thing. So definitely useful, but again, those missed kicks really hurt, and I just figured like Tucker's accuracy would mitigate that risk. So hopefully he remains as automatic as he has been to this point in his career. I guess we'll quickly transition over to my team. The rest of how that draft went. 6th round, DJ Moore. Then I got Damian Harris, Chase Edmonds, my first share of Edmonds. Still not sure how I feel about that. I'll pick your brain about that in a second. Tunyon, Gallup, Hollywood Brown. Also ended up with Cam Newton. And a little while later, I got a bunch of receivers. I loaded up, went with Sammy Watkins, Van Jefferson, Tim Patrick, Nico Collins for round 16 through 19. Then rounded things out, Jamar Jefferson, Mark Ingram, and Tyler Conklin. So again, fully expecting to cut Ingram if provided that there are moves in this league. But otherwise, I feel okay about this one. This is my first foray into the fishbowl, and obviously it's got a unique set of scoring, and you never really know who you're drafting against. We had a pretty fun league. Some interesting picks were made, of course, but all in all, I think I put myself in decent position here. We'll see if those are famous last words, in a couple months.
Well, you said you took Cam, so I think it's safe to say you're gonna win your league.
Okay, all right. That was real. That was all the preamble was intended to evoke. So we got it, and now we're good. So that there wraps up ye ol' fishbowl discussion. So Mario, let's get into some ADPs that have stood out to you. Some guys that are values at their current ADP. Some guys that are some are in the higher risk, some of the higher round guys, but there's a bunch of other guys that won't totally sting if they don't end up panning out. But either way, worthwhile risks nonetheless. Actually, I want to start towards the back and work our way up the board. So Leonard Fournette is kind of an interesting case. He's not like a sexy pick anymore. I think those days seem to have come and gone. But what do you like about him at his current ADP and how things are setting up as far as this Buccaneers offense is concerned, to where he's that worthwhile late round running back?
Yeah, it might be a little tougher to make him useful in redraft or whatever, wherever you have to start players, because it's probably not going to be easy to see his good games coming. Like Ronald Jones is probably a better pure runner. I think, though, Fournette should trend toward taking over the lead back role there, just because he is ahead of Jones as a passing down running back. That's clear. And I don't think Gio Bernard is there to just take the passing down work from Fournette and then, just basically reducing Fournette versus Jones as a runner being the question. Like I think Fournette is going to trend toward the front, and then if they get in a catch-up situation, or if they get in a shootout where they get into like 75 snaps in the game or something, yeah, Gio becomes a candidate in that case to push for 20, maybe 25 snaps. But usually I think he's going to be more like 15 snaps a game, maybe garbage time looks. And part of why I'm a little optimistic about Fournette is just that he finished last year so strongly, and Jones was okay during that stretch, but Fournette was really effective basically throughout that last 7 games that they had.
I mean, he was playoff Lenny turned into Lamborghini Lenny, which turned into Lombardi Lenny. So quite the progression he had towards the end of the season.
But yeah, if he's producing like he did in that stretch as a pass catcher, there's not much reason for Bernard to play. And in the 11th round, I just feel like the risk is so low, and like Ronald Jones has gotten nicked up in the past. It's not that hard to imagine Fournette becoming a 3-down player for what could be the league's best team, one of the highest scoring offenses, one of the teams that will be in a run viable game script most often because their defense is as good as it is too. I think Fournette has largely struggled in the NFL, or at least disappointed relative to his prospect status, just because a lot of his big plays at LSU were the result of having a huge offensive line advantage, and that scenario never really recreated itself in Jacksonville, but it kind of is, I think, in Tampa Bay. Like, their offensive line with Wirfs being a huge steal, that offensive line could become more analogous to what he had at LSU, and even if you don't think he's a good running back, he's still a huge, fast guy, and if the safeties are far back and the offensive line is giving him room to build up speed, he can just keep doing what he did at the end of last year. So that's not something that I feel certain will happen or anything, but once we're in the 11th round, my alternatives don't have anything more solid to go on anyway.
See, exactly. So, I mean, there's a lot of factors in play, and again, when you can get Fournette, in the 11th round in these redraft leagues, as much as he may be that relative disappointment, compared to what he was coming out, where, he's drawing all the comparisons to, so many, Hall of Fame even level running backs. He's obviously not going to get there, at least we don't think so. But, the promising second act in Tampa Bay, at least to start here, and I think it could definitely continue. I think you make a good case for him there. I'm going to make you talk about David Johnson for a minute, because he's someone that I think everyone hates to even acknowledge the Texans, and that's totally fair. I think that they are far and away the worst team in football, and maybe one of the worst in recent memory. Or, again, provided that there's no Deshaun Watson this season, but they still have to play 17 games, and presumably they are not going to do the Bourbon Bowl, kneel down every single play. So they're going to run an offense, or at least, something that resembles one. And David Johnson, obviously tops that running back group.
Yeah, so I guess I should have said when I was talking about Fournette and there being no alternatives with more solid cases to make, I think David Johnson actually has probably a bit more solid of a case, but they're both overlooked in my opinion. It's just that even more egregiously for Johnson, especially because Johnson falls almost to the end of the 12th round pretty regularly. Like, I would guess he basically goes about a round before Fournette in most cases. So I will try to get both teams. And the thing about Johnson is, I know he's been a pain for years now. He gets hurt. We keep getting our hopes back up, and they keep being let down again by some new injury, something or another, a few sluggish games here or there. Last year, though, he was pretty much just good. He got hurt, of course, but especially in those final 3 weeks, he was a monster. He had an 11-catch, 106-yard game against the Colts that followed it up with 128 yards on 12 carries against the Bengals, then 84 yards and a touchdown on the ground against Tennessee, 36 more yards in the air. Particularly if we believe that the Texans are going to fall behind in every game, we should think that David Johnson can play, 50 snaps per game, because Phillip Lindsay is not going to be the passing down back. I would guess Mark Ingram would sooner get cut than encroach upon David Johnson's passing down work. So I feel like we pretty quickly corner ourselves into concluding that if he's able to, David Johnson will play by far the most snaps here. And I can imagine Lindsey being as good or a better of a ball carrier specifically, but if they're not in a position to run the ball in the game, that doesn't really matter. And I don't even know if it's a given that Philip Lindsay's a better pure runner than David Johnson. For what it's worth, I have taken Lindsay too in like the 17th round, something like that, because he's so cheap. Take almost any RB2 in that range, and I think he's better than probably some of them out there. But David Johnson could be that kind of probably not 20 carry, but he could be a 15 carry, 5 or 6 catch kind of running back. And if he doesn't get hurt, it almost seems more likely than not.
No, absolutely. So yeah, oddly enough, it does feel like David Johnson does have those solid cases. It feels like people just don't want to investigate the Texans' offense too much.
He's going later than like Latavius Murray and these guys who won't even play hardly. It's just strange.
Right. So that definitely checks out. Just such a good path to volume, and that's obviously what we're chasing, especially in that portion of the draft. Let's
end
move
of the
on.
12th round.
That's crazy. That's nuts.
Sorry, it's just crazy. Yeah, sorry.
Let's move on over Christian Kirk. What's the deal with him?
I'm not going to put him in quite the same category of just this article that I'm writing and some of these names that we picked from. It was guys who I'm basically like telling people at their current price, you might as well buy them in bulk. There's no actual risk at this price. There's some risk with Kirk. I'm personally taking the leap of faith anyway and buying a lot because I have confidence in him. And the way that case would go is I do acknowledge that Rondale Moore is a problem. AJ Green could be a problem for Kirk too. But the way I see it, Kirk coming out of A&M was as good of a slot receiver prospect as Rondale Moore was this year. And Kirk has at no point embarrassed himself as an NFL player. If anything, it's like when he's gotten a real opportunity to produce, he has. But he's been doing two things. One was playing out of position, especially last year. Like I feel like he played in the slot like the first 3 or 4 games of 2019, but for some reason all of 2020 he lined up on the right side pretty much every play, and then Fitzgerald was in the slot pretty much every play. DeAndre Hopkins on the far left every play. So out of those 3, Kirk was running by far the farthest downfield, something like 11.5 ADOT. DeAndre Hopkins is at like 8.7. Fitzgerald's probably at like, I don't know, 6, something like that. So Kirk was the fastest of those 3, but he's only like a 4.47 guy. He's supposed to be a slot receiver. He's more of like a Golden Tate than a downfield kind of guy, and they were using him largely as a downfield specialist, and they throw these bombs to him deep, and he doesn't really create separation on those plays. What he does is he gets a quick window underneath, and then he weaves through the defense after the catch. And he was great at that at Texas A&M. If you had to go beyond Rondale Moore for the question of best true freshman receiver season of like 2010 or further, Christian Kirk's freshman season at A&M would probably be the competition for Rondale Moore. Like he had, it was a different kind of look. But he stepped onto a team that had Ricky Seals-Jones and Speedy Noyle, who were both really high recruits at the time, who had a lot of hype, and Josh Reynolds, who's 2 years older, and he just stepped in and was immediately their best receiver. So if Rondale Moore is a great prospect because he had a big true freshman year, then so is Christian Kirk, and they play the same position. Kirk has 3 years of NFL experience. I think Rondale Moore is going to be more like the Andy Isabella role from last year, but just bigger and more effective, obviously. But I think Kirk is going to be the Larry Fitzgerald replacement, and the current market doesn't leave that possibility open at all. The current market says Christian Kirk's just a backup, and I don't think that's true.
Especially with how many receivers they're running out there in their given formations. Yeah, no, that definitely tracks, and yeah, I think people have been a little bit quick to throw the dirt on Christian Kirk. I think that getting that Fitzgerald opportunity like you're envisioning right there would be absolutely huge, and he would be able to crush value at his current ADP. Let's get on over. Let's go way up the board. Let's get into the first round quick before we head out. Talk to me about Jonathan Taylor and his current ADP and just kind of how to navigate that first round if he's available to you.
Yeah, so I took him a bunch of times at the 6th pick. And I wouldn't tell anyone that it's risk-free at that price, but at the 10th pick, the only risk that there is to Taylor is the same injury risk that exists with any other player. There's no meaningful risk in taking Jonathan Taylor 10th overall. It's it's what happens when people get too high on their wide receiver fetishization and think that they're smart for taking Stephon Diggs 7th overall ahead of Taylor or whatever. I don't see other running backs jumping Taylor in the order. It seems like it's just receivers like Tyreek, Stephon Diggs getting drafted higher. I assume somebody wrote some article about why they should do that, and I assume people are just doing what they're told. But they're going to regret it. If Taylor stays healthy, they're going to wish they took him and they didn't let somebody else in their team get him. Not just at the 10th pick. I'm seeing him fall into like the mid-second round. This is just nonsense. Like you're not thinking it through. But anyway, if you want to let the probably the best pure runner in the league after Nick Chubb and Dalvin Cook and Kamara, I'll say, fall to the second round because Marlon Mack? I don't know.
Yeah, Marlon Mack coming off the Achilles.
If you want to do that, then please invite me to your league. I'd love to hang out with you guys.
Simple enough. Yeah. So the fade JT at your own risk, especially if he's still around to you at pick 10 and beyond, and especially if he's there in the second round. That's an absolute steal. Yeah, that's him ridiculous. Over Diggs for sure. Like, yeah, I had not even really considered that as something that someone would do and say that it's a very good strategy. So interesting. But people love their receivers and they love to hate their running backs. So
they love to just desperately wish that all the running backs break their legs in week 1. They love to do that.
Do.
It's a way to live, I guess. You could choose to live that way.
And they do, and they're real loud about it as well. I think that's going to wrap it up for this week's edition of the RotoWire NFL podcast, brought to you by our friends over at WinBet. And starting next week, Mario, we got an exciting development where we are going to have NFL podcasts, every single weekday. So starting things off Monday, Jeff and Chris back in the saddle talking NFL. That's always a great one. Tuesday, Jake Lutarski and Joe Bartle handle the waiver wire. Wednesdays, Jeff is always joined by an industry guest. Thursday, we're holding it down for you, of course, myself and Mario. And then Friday, some DFS with Andrew Laird and Scott Genstad. So a really, really strong lineup that we're rolling out once again. So stay tuned for that coming up this coming Monday. So very exciting stuff. And again, for Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening to the RotoWire NFL podcast, brought to you by WinBet.
Try RotoWire today, free for 10 days. Get our premium tools, rankings, analysis, and breaking news alerts. No credit card required. Go to rotowire.com/try.